Shall we start the recording so people can listen?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I've had the last webinar, I had people from Brazil and Indonesia, so very exciting for me. My name is Robin DeLucia, and I live in Sydney, Australia. I am hosting free webinars because I am a career coach, so I have lots of clients that I help. And so I thought, what better way and what better timing during the COVID pandemic than to offer some free advice to people. And I'll talk about some new creative things that I've been trying with some of my clients as well to get you noticed. So we'll have the workshop for about an hour, got about 20 slides. You don't have to take pictures because we'll make the recording available to you. Let me just show you. Your sound will be muted and I don't get to ever see you. So if you're in your pajamas, congratulations. We will take questions throughout the presentation. You're not interrupting me. So if you just type the question in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, you can submit questions. You can also submit them anonymously if you like. And I'll also make the slides available to you if you would like that, so that you don't have to worry about taking pictures of the slides. I did a webinar last week and people were taking photos, but I don't have a problem. The more we help each other, the better our economy can rebound. So I'm happy to share this information with people. Okay, so today we're going to cover resumes. I'm actually going to show you a real life bad version of a resume, a good version. I'll share cover letter as well. We'll talk about interview skills that can set you apart. And also it's really important to be clear on what you're looking for. So telling a recruiter or an employer that you're good at everything is just not cutting it anymore. You need to know your strengths, and I'll talk to you about how to prepare those stories and how to talk about those strengths. I've got resources of where to find jobs that are right for you. And at the end, so at 12 o'clock after the hour, I will stay on for at least 30 minutes. If anyone has any questions, happy to field more questions from anyone that's joined. So if you join late, we'll be recording the session. We'll be giving you the slides, so not to worry. And with that, let's get started. So by the way, I've got Belinda, my colleague, who's helping me on the Zoom controls. So if we run into technical difficulties, she'll help me out. Thank you, Belinda. Okay, so the first topic that we'll cover is resumes. And I find that there's so much information on the internet about resumes, but people still struggle to talk about themselves. And what I try to incorporate in people's resumes is, particularly in that objective statement at the top, it's really important to have kind of a human voice. Tell them about who you are, what are you passionate about, and what value you bring to the organization. So trying to get away from the business jargon. And then also in your cover letter, talking about, you know, I've been a stay-at-home mom for 5 years now. I'm looking to re-enter the workforce. So having a human voice means it's as if you're talking to someone. And it's difficult for people to do, but that is what we're shooting for in getting you to stand apart from the competition. So I'll show you an example of that. Now, just a little bit more detail on resume writing. So a lot of people put all the keywords, you know, team player, super motivated, detail oriented, and those are quite overused in all of the industries. So this is just an example of what got this lady a job. So first she had written motivated admin professional, skilled in all MS Office applications, detail oriented, looking for a new challenge. She changed it to I'm an admin assistant looking for a busy office to organize. My strength is to support a CEO. So she's made it very specific and very personal. And believe it or not, out of 200 applicants, this got her the job. So that's just an example of changing to human voice. Now, what I want to do is I want to share with you a resume that I had just about 2 months ago. So it was in the middle of COVID. So this is when you look at it, it's a pretty good resume, right? So Julie, she's a very good communicator. So that's I know that about her, that's one of her top strengths. So she's very good at describing things that she does. However, there are a few things that are wrong with this resume, which I've helped her change it, and I'll show you the new version in a minute. So in Australia, even though some people are very educational focused, it's probably not necessary to put all of these acronyms and all of these qualifications that she has at the top. It's good to still list them in your resume, but right up front, sometimes Aussies are funny, and there is this thing called tall poppy syndrome, and they don't want you to brag about all your education. They're more interested in your experience. The other things that are wrong on this resume is that she's got her home address and her suburb. And this is true for anyone around Australia. You should not put your home suburb, because what that does is it allows the employer to decide, oh, they probably won't be as motivated to travel an hour to the job or the workplace, and they'll discard your resume. So don't give them that choice. Look on LinkedIn and read tips from the experts. They also tell people don't put your suburb anymore. So just list your email address, your LinkedIn, your name, and your mobile number. Those are the most important details. Now, I like that she's actually titled what type of role, like she's labeled herself what role she's looking for. You don't always have to do that, but you should have an objective statement, and usually it should only be one paragraph. She got 3 paragraphs, so very, very wordy. And then as you go on in this resume, she's got key areas of expertise. By the way, notice it's 9 pages. So the maximum resume should be 4 pages, and only that's justified if you've got like 15 years of career history that you're including. So if you only have like 5 years of work history, your resume should be 2 pages, depending on the content. Then she's got the second page full of, selected benchmarks and milestones. So I think that's another word for achievements, which is great. But again, they're really wordy. I just don't think people have time to read the resume in this level of detail. You have, on average, 6 seconds to make a good impression with your resume, to pique, to make the reader curious, and then that they'll read on to the second page. So really try your best to summarize who you are on that 1 page. She's taken almost 2 or 3 pages. Then she goes back into personal dimensions, which, to be honest, that's similar for key areas of expertise. Then she's accidentally got a 3rd page here that's blank. That would get her resume thrown out, no matter how great she is. 4th page is a whole page on just 1 job. So generally, you should have each job like no more than half a page. Again, she's got a couple of paragraphs describing Qantas. We all know who Qantas is, but she's gone into detail on what her role is. And then she has done a good thing of listing achievements, which I think are absolute must for all resumes nowadays. The only time that is really hard for achievements on a resume is if you're high school or you're just out of uni and you just haven't had much work experience yet. So I guess that's kind of the gist of it, is that, she's got 1 page per job. It's just too much wording. If you noticed, even her font that she selected, Georgia, is really hard to read on the eyes if you're reading 100, 200 resumes a day. So if you get down to the very bottom page, she's got her education and qualifications, which is important, but she's listed all her referees. And I would tell her to hold back your referees, because you want to be able to call them and give them the heads up. If I get a call for a reference and I haven't been given the heads up, I'm going to be a bit cranky, And I've heard people say that they weren't given the courtesy of knowing which job you applied for and how to advocate for you. So now you risk not getting as good of a positive reference if the person that the employer calls isn't, the person wasn't made aware. So that's the bad version of the resume. Now let's look at the new and improved version. Okay, so there's very subtle things in this new version. She doesn't have all the acronyms. She's just chosen to put the CPPM qualification. She's got the very simple things, mobile phone, LinkedIn link URL. And by the way, she's customized it to include her vanity URL, so she's removed all the numbers off of it, which is very easy to do. Her email, she shrunk her personal profile. It's a bit human voice, so she says she has a natural curiosity to understand business purpose, genuine respect for people, a desire for continuous improvement that has underpinned her career. Then she goes on and she lists her capabilities, but what's much more striking now is she lists proof or evidence. So she was appointed as the new leader of the Qantas procurement governance team. She had to build a management framework. She had to build relationships to get that buy-in. So she's gone in each of these and given very specific examples of how she does have these capabilities, and that's really hard. That's what I spend a lot of time with people doing, is getting that first page right, because you want it to jump out off the page to the person that's reading it, and to give real solid evidence of you having that capability. This isn't necessary for everyone, but in this case, she listed like kind of a career summary at a glance. And she's just listed very simply the titles that she had. It's to her advantage that she's worked for big companies like Qantas and American Express. So that's an endorsement to the person that's reading the resume. And then she starts the employment history, and she's kind of done a good job of shrinking it. So she's shrunk her, here's what I did at the company. Here were my normal duties. She had to manage up to 300 contracts. And then she goes into achievements. And in some of them, she's got numbers, right? So greater than 150 satisfied stakeholders. She enabled the achievement of $25 million in procurement savings. So she's got some numbers if you can. It's not required for all achievements, but she's done a better job of listing her achievements in each of her roles. And then she's got her education. She's got, she's taken off the references. And so this is a clean resume. And by the way, after she revamped it, she had 2 different employers that she was interviewing for, and she did get a role as a governance manager. So I think she's, well, I know she's now working at Vodafone. So this actually helped her get the job during COVID. So I think she started that job in May or June. So that's kind of my examples. The other thing I would point out is, if you notice, it's very subtle, but the coloring and the branding are quite nicer. So you've got like a blue palette of the heading at the top. You can make your cover letter match that so they remember your name. She's got the gold section headings. Even when you go down to the job history, she's kind of made it easy on the eyes, where you've got the title and the time frame that she conducted that job right next to the job, so people don't know sometimes where to put the timing when they started and stopped, but it really should be next to the job title. She's got these headings. She's got tick marks for the achievements, so somebody can scan those. So all of these things make a difference and are quite helpful in you standing out from a pile of resumes. The other thing that I would like to show you is, let me go back to the presentation. So just to wrap up resume do's and don'ts, keep it to 3 to 4 pages. Job history, you don't need to go back more than 15 years. There's a way to reference old job history that I can tell people about if that's a situation for them, but otherwise you just want to put the job details for no more than 15 years. A lot of people that have been out of work, you do need to explain gaps in your job history. If you took a few years off, at least if it's 6 months or more, you need to explain it. This year, it's probably less judgment if you have a job gap because of COVID. So lots of people have lost their jobs. So if you say that you stopped working in March, people are going to know or assume that it is because of COVID or more recent. Use the right font size, the right size, and we'll show you another slide that shows you the difference between the fonts. Do list achievements. This is like new, it's only come about in the last few years. And it's hard for people to do, but it's really answering the question, like, what are you proud of? How did you leave the job better than when you found it? Did you get promoted? Did you get asked to be trainer? Did you get selected to learn a new technology? So all of those types of things are achievements. Yeah, and so I think the only time that people should include their photo is maybe if they're applying for a public relations role or sometimes marketing, because they have to interact with a lot of customers. But generally, I discourage people. I used to be an HR director, and we would actually throw out resumes that had a photo because we didn't want to be accused of hiring based on appearance, and we didn't want to be accused of not hiring based on appearance. So we just kept it consistent and discounted all resumes with a photo. I think that's about it. So let me move on. Now, interview. So sorry, before I do that, so let me just go and open up a cover letter. So I was talking about human voice. So this is just a sample of a human voice and of a cover letter. So this lady, Sally, is applying for the People and Culture Manager. She actually talks about, she's previously worked in HR organizations and a human voice. She's seeking a challenging job where she can re-enter the HR industry after raising 2 small children. So she's being upfront about that. And then the secret is she's matched the jargon and the language from the job advertisement. So you should be customizing your cover letter, not your resume for every job, but the cover letter, she's just pasted the bullet points that they're asking, and then she's written proof, just like Julie did in her resume. She's given a little bit of stories of how she has credibility that she meets all of their requirements. And then just to wow them, this is just one other tip that I give people to stand out is there's usually something in the advertisement that talks about the company's values. And if you can just paste a sentence of that, so in this case, you will have an empathetic approach and the ability to build strong workplace relationships with employees at all levels. So she pasted that in there and then says, I find this very much aligns with my natural strength. So again, that's impressive to someone that reads 100 cover letters a day, and it gives the person all the information. Okay, yep, I can be assured that they tick the box that we're looking for, and I can put them forward for the first round of interviews potentially. So that's just giving you an example of a cover letter, and it's the same branding that matches the resume. Okay, so now moving on to interviews. This is really hard for people. So you get the general, tell me about yourself. It is a test. It's a test to see how relatable you are, and are you going to just repeat your resume summary, or are you going to tell them a bit more about yourself? The right approach is to do a little bit of both. But, I was talking with a client this week, and he had an interview today, right now. I'm waiting to hear from him to hear how it went. So it was a 2nd round interview. And he asked me, how do I answer that question? I said, tell them that you're mad about car racing and that you're the only person that moved to Australia from Pakistan. That tells people that you're brave and you're courageous. Tell them about, things that you're passionate about in the finance industry. So he's not going to recite his resume. They already have that, but he wants to convey, like, this is who I am as a person. I'm engaged to be married, happy to move to another city for the role. So all of those things can be weaved into your tell me about yourself. if you are a person that's really nervous, you need to write down the bullet points and practice it in the mirror, to your dog, to your kids, just so it doesn't sound too robotic. And the more you say it, the more natural it sounds. And then you'd always want to know what your top strengths are, because generally you do get asked that in an interview. So if you're organized, have some stories in your head that demonstrate that you've got that strength. If you're analytical, if you're very chatty and communicative, you can give examples. And generally, this is also the same response to when they ask you, what is your weakness? So if my strength is communication, my weakness might be that I need to be quiet sometimes and notice the body language of others and let others talk. So when I see people start to kind of tune out, their eyes look away, I then realize, I need to stop talking, and I'll ask others questions. So that can be a weakness for me. So it's showing that self-awareness to someone. If you're analytical, you could take a long time to make decisions, but you always want to make really good decisions, but you're working on that. So making faster decisions for smaller things that don't need such deliberation. What other strengths? Those strengths have a opposite effect. They can be a weakness. If you're really private and quiet, you can say that that can be perceived as a weakness by others. So it takes a while to get to know me before I open up to others. So you can say that in an interview. So there's lots of, there's 34 strengths. I'll show you in a minute. There's a tool, a profiling tool that you can take for $30, and it'll give you your top 5 strengths. And it's very good for people in interviews. The other thing you need to prepare are your STAR stories, and STAR is an acronym. It's a technique that I'll show you in a minute, but you want to have a story about for a behavioral question. So these are examples of interview behavioral questions. So describe a time you dealt with a difficult person. Give me an example when you helped bring the team together. Tell me about when you solved a problem. So you want to have, this is the problem solving, this is the difficult person, bringing the team together as leadership or communication. So you want to have examples that you can think of at different workplaces, if possible, or different jobs or teams that you worked in. So have stories prepared. And then the other way that can set you apart is asking really great questions at the end of your interview. So people have been really nervous. They probably didn't perform the best in interviews, and some people don't. But at the end, when I ask questions like, what do you think are the top 2 or 3 challenges in this role? That's a very thoughtful question. Or ask, what are the 3 goals of the organization in the next 3 years? Or how did you find your career? How do you like working for this company? The best question that I've been getting clients to ask in the last few months, and it's actually been really positive results, the interviewers are loving it, is at the very end, asking the interviewer, do you have any reservations about me fulfilling this role? Such a great way to get immediate feedback, and you kind of have an indicator, were you a superstar in the interview, or were you lacking something? So they will tell you right up front. And I swear that's such a good method in Australia, because generally you do not get feedback on your interview. So it's a really good technique to ask at the end, and it shows that you want that feedback regardless of whether you get the role. Okay, so I'm just checking any questions so far. So feel free to submit questions again on the Q&A tab down below, and we will pick those up as we go. Okay, so this is a list of tips for people that were not born in Australia. There is a bit of discrimination, and they really box you into the last role. So if you, like I had a young lady a week ago that has migrated from Iran. She's an architect, so she's got 3 years of experience, but she migrated on a student visa, which limits your number of hours that you can work. You can only work 25 hours. So she worked at this place, I think it was called like the Fun Lab here in Sydney. And so what we did in her resume was we made it listed as she worked at this Fun Lab on a student visa, so that they understood that that's not how she should be labeled in her quest for finding an architecture job. So you just want to be able to creatively make sure that they understand why you took a job in another industry. You might have been waiting for your permanent residency visa. Sometimes if you did do a job that wasn't related to the industry you're targeting, you want to list the duties that relate to the job that you're targeting so that it still bridges, or you can even put in parentheses, yes, this was my job title, but I was actually doing this role, and that might relate more to the industry that you're targeting. So it's a bit harder to get around that, but they do judge you based on the last role that you had. So if you're trying to play that down, definitely make sure it's on the second page of your resume. The next thing is credibility, and that means getting proof. So not just saying, oh, I've worked on lots of design projects and I've generally, love doing collaboration with teams on XYZ designs. You actually need to say, I worked on, this project, Ladies of the Night project that was to create an end user experience, and we won an award for this project. So that gives much clearer credibility and proof. And then achievements, which I've talked about. So that's something that's really new and important in resumes. They don't care much anymore about your responsibilities or the duties of your job. They care more about what you achieved in each of your roles. So if you had a role for 5 years or 10 years and you have no achievements, that's not good. So you want to be able to say that you moved up in the company or you moved around to different roles or different projects, and you want to showcase that. And then asking good questions are always a good reflection of yourself when you're in an interview. And persistence. So I've been trying some new things with people. So I've got a couple of clients that are trying to get into the Australian job market, but they won't be given a chance because they don't have local experience. So now I've got a gentleman who's writing letters, what we call snail mail, and actually mailing it to the company. Well, one company gave the letter, the CEO gave the letter to the HR director. The HR director wrote him an email and said, we're going to keep your resume on file. So that's kind of a win, because if he continues to keep in touch with that HR person, he might find himself an opportunity. Okay, so I'm going to look at some of these questions. Okay, so some online application programs don't provide an opportunity for attaching a cover letter. What is your advice? Would it work if I put my cover letter together with my resume? That is a really good question. So I would say that cover letters, I've kind of polled over time recruiters and employers, and it seems like it's 50-50. Half look at the cover letters, half never read it. So it's almost like a company policy, and then you don't know who in that company actually likes reading cover letters. Some people say they read them all, others say they read none. So if they're actually saying they don't want a cover letter, I wouldn't waste the time. I mean, you could put it in with your resume and PDF it all, but I have the sense that that company would probably not read your cover letter. So maybe you need to put a little bit more detail in your resume, that you have a permanent resident visa, or that you're available right away. So things like that that are generally in your cover letter are not in your resume. So you might have to get a little creative, but that's a great question. Another question in the chat box, is that what we're saying? Where is the chat box? Okay. Okay, so the question was, if you have more than 15 years experience, how do you showcase that? So the summary box that I showed you in Julie's resume, it had a summary of the last few jobs that she's had and the years that she worked in it. You can put one line down below that says you also have experience at ABC company, XYZ company, and this company in this industry. So you kind of put a one-liner and then, you know, more information if requested. So you can kind of summarize that in the career summary table if you have more than 15 years that you want them to know about. I hope that answers those questions. Okay, let's move on. Oh, we have one more question. Thank you. Okay. No worries. All right, so let's go on to the STAR methodology. So this is something I learned in America. I've been in Australia for 11 years, and I still come across a lot of people that had not heard of it. So it's actually a way to tell a story. And if you have your notes that you are okay to bring to an interview, and actually write out the box on a piece of paper, just like this box. So it's got 2 columns. You write out the situation, the task, the action, and the result. And then it's kind of the setting up of one young lady said it was the setting up of a joke. It helped her not ruin and tell the punchline too early. But it's setting up like who is in the scenario. So you were newly employed. And by the way, this is all to answer the behavioral question, tell me about a time when you worked with someone you didn't like. So this is a question that my daughter was asked, and we had rehearsed it, so it was really good. So she talked about, she was very new to the job. She was an all-rounder at a cafe. That means you're working the register, you're cleaning, you're making food in the back. She said on her second day, she was asked to fill orders. She hadn't done it before. She asked one of the ladies. It was one of the older ladies, and she didn't give as much detail, which is probably good in the interview, but it was an older lady that was always cranky with the young teenagers that were hired at this cafe. So she was not helpful. She yelled at her. And so this caused my daughter, I think another person took sympathy and came over and helped her. And from that, she learned to minimize her interactions with this lady and to do everything not to make her mad. So what she didn't tell the interviewer was that she actually got so good at the cafe that they let her pick her shifts every week. So she avoided working with this cranky lady. If you say there's never been a time that you didn't like someone at work, we don't believe you, because everybody has worked with a not so nice person. So you do need to have an answer to this question. But that's kind of breaking it down, the situation, the task that you were assigned, the action that you took, and then the results. So most of your stories would fit into that format. It should be no more than 2 minutes. And sometimes if you think people think you're not answering the question, you watch their eyes. Are they looking down? Are they looking at their notes? Looking at their watch? You can stop and go, am I answering your question? And then they'll clarify for you. But make sure you're not rambling on with too much detail. That's what this box is for in your notes, so that you can just stick to the facts and the very important parts of the story. Okay, so then let's go on to interviews, do's and don'ts. I had a man who had a interview a couple weeks ago with Fuji Xerox. He was so excited about this job. And so he asked me, Robin, will you do a mock interview with me? And I said, sure. So I did a mock interview with him, and it was on Zoom because of COVID. And he showed up with a suit and a tie, and I was so happy. And I gave him, I have this evaluation form that I score you on different areas. And I gave him, outstanding for the way he dressed for the interview. Doesn't mean you have to wear a suit and tie for every interview, but dress up, make it noticeable that you put your effort into it, because nobody gets scored negative points for dressing up in an interview. Never heard any manager or leader say, oh, they overdressed. It's impressive. And by the way, a lot of your peers will not have dressed up. So again, this is a way to stand out. He went to the Fuji Xerox round 1 interview. He got a round 2 interview as well. The round 1 interview, they actually said to him, the big manager and the middle manager both said, thank you so much for dressing up, because they had interviewed 4 other people and they must not have dressed up as much as this man did. So it was good affirmation for him. So have your STAR stories. You can, on Zoom, you can leave them on your notes on your desk in front of you, just for a reminder. Research the company and the person if you can find them on LinkedIn. Show self-awareness by sharing stories of how you've learned from your mistakes. Be yourself. Yes, people ask me, should I send a thank you note? Always, because again, it sets you apart. Don't misrepresent your previous experience. Don't diminish your value. If you think, oh, I don't have experience in this particular role, don't even mention it. You can do it. Don't forget to bring good, thoughtful questions. If you email me, I've got an interview guide and I've got a list of really great questions that you can ask at the end of the interview. Don't forget to do your star pose. So this kind of makes people laugh, but there's a TED talk on this that I share at the end of this presentation. So this for people that are nervous, probably more often women that are nervous in job interviews, if you're doing it in person, or even if not, do the star pose before. So it's kind of like you're the Olympic athlete running over the finish line. They do this star pose. If you do it for like 30 to 60 seconds, it's been proven that it changes your brain chemistry and relaxes you. So that's the star pose, and just some deep breathing, and that helps you function better during the interview. Try not to ramble. Try not to, everybody's nervous. Like, I just haven't met anyone that loves job interviews. However, can say, like, even if I told you at the beginning of this presentation that I'm nervous, people's general reaction is, okay, well then that's totally understandable. So you can say it once that I'm nervous, can I start over to answer your question? And people do understand that. Nobody likes the scrutiny of being in a job interview. And then I always like to tell people nowadays, turn off the self camera view. So I had a lady that interviewed at Qantas, and she had, I think, 1 minute to prepare for the question. So nobody was on the other end. She had 2 minutes to respond to the question. And she said, seeing herself on that camera was just so distracting. And so I do that as well. I turn off my camera view so that it doesn't prevent me from talking from the heart and talking naturally. So that's my tip if you do have online webcam interviews. Okay, so do we have any new questions? Okay, a new question is, some jobs advertised on LinkedIn give the option of applying through LinkedIn and the company's website. Do you recommend to apply through LinkedIn or go directly to the company's website? So I think if it's a big brand company, I think it is better to go to the company's website, but then sometimes that's problematic. So I've seen, and in years past, the company websites make you go through like 16 pages. Basically, you're putting all the resume information into their system, and those I would actually tell you to go through LinkedIn, because that way they take you as you are, put your resume into that format. But generally the company's website has a bit more detail, and so if that detail can help you get the job, then I would do it. But I do like that you're looking at LinkedIn job advertisements. Some people don't realize, when I've done comparisons from Seek to LinkedIn, I found that more jobs are advertised on LinkedIn because there's a better discount rate for employers to advertise on LinkedIn than there is on Seek. So I used to be an HR director, and we had to buy, I don't know, like 40 job advertisements, and we had to pay $200 per ad. So the more we bought, the better discount, but they can be expensive. So great question. Thank you. Okay, so let's move on. Let me just click back on my screen. Okay, so knowing what you want, you know, Australians can tell if you are bluffing. So if you say, oh, I can do everything for this job, they kind of know that you're not being truthful. So you want to have some very candid responses of why you want the job or why you want to work there. So say, you know, this is in the industry that you've always dreamed of, that this has been your goal for the last 5 years. Or you really like the variety of products that this company deals with. So it's it's not just about you and do your skills match the company. It's about, what are the things that are exciting about that match what excite you and the company. But also, know your limitations. So if you can see a job that's going to be a lower level job, be honest about that and say, well, I know that I've had leadership roles in the past, but I actually have decided that I'd rather be a worker bee or on the front lines rather than doing leadership roles, because I find it hard to performance manage employees. So just having that self-awareness and that honest conversation, it builds trust in your interview, and you really want to be honest about that. And then body language, having eye contact with, even if you have 2 or 3 interviewers, you have to be careful to make eye contact with all of them as you're answering questions. So don't forget that. And then your posture, so having your shoulders back, just having positive body language. I'll see a lot of LinkedIn photos with no smile, and a smile makes you more approachable. So it's hard for some people to remember that in an interview, but do try to smile. So even put a little Post-it note up there if you can to remind you. And no waffling. So confidence is important. You can be confident and not arrogant, so not a know-it-all. So I had a mock interview with someone a few weeks ago, and he did come across as arrogant, and it was beautiful because after the mock interview was done, I gave him feedback that, I interrupted him to clarify for him that he wasn't answering the question, but he kind of cut me off and he kept going. And I said, that can come across as arrogant. He was like, that's the best feedback. I didn't know that. And he did have a different culture from Aussie. So I said, you just want to watch the body language. And if they do interrupt you, it's for reasons. You want to tune into that and maybe change what you're saying so that you're satisfying their question. And the waffling is going on and on and on, which is why I would interrupt as an interviewer. So you just want to watch for those signs when you might be too chatty or giving too much detail. You need to practice summarizing. We talked a little bit about being honest and conveying your passion. So this is just a little bit more. So you can even use, like if you did a strength survey and it came back that said your strength is strategic. Why do you want this job? Because I love solving problems and I love finding multiple solutions to one problem. So why should I hire you? Because, I am a strategic thinker. I like to look at different ways of proposing solutions to the team and to the boss. And so that excites me. So that's how you convey passion. Employers don't want to take a risk on you if they think you're just bluffing and saying, oh yeah, you should hire me because I have all the skills. It's not about the skills anymore. They know that if you're more passionate and happier in the job, you're more likely to stay longer and you're more likely to recruit other people that would be good in the company. So you don't want to fake it, whether you are excited about the job or not. Okay, so this is just a little bit more detail on the strengths. So I am a accredited GALLUP strengths coach. So I have been for 4 years, and I lost count. I think I've done 550, maybe 600 by now, one-on-one strengths coaching debriefs. So the person will take an online survey, and then we will spend 30, 60, 90 minutes depending on the results that they get back, unpacking their strengths. These are my top 5 strengths. I know my kids' strengths. They're uni students and high school teacher. We know their strengths. They help with career decisions. They help in talking about examples in job interviews. Mine are pretty straightforward. So, good with people, always cheery, a ranger. I'm quite the organizer, but that doesn't mean that I'm organized, like, let's say in my bedroom or like my husband has a ranger. He loves the kitchen to be organized. I love the bathroom to be organized. So it's quite unique in how we use our strengths. Responsibility is really good work ethic. I want to be reliable. I always prepare for my client meetings. I prepare for my webinars, and make sure the content is relevant. So I had to take out handshakes, you know, out of my webinar slides because that's just not applicable anymore from COVID. And the last one that's really governs my career is woo. I love winning others over. That means I love meeting new people. I talk to the bus driver, I talk to the Kohl's cashier, I talk to people in the dog park. I just like meeting new people. So just knowing your strengths and knowing how you use them every day. If you can find a job that allows you to use all of your strengths every day, you'll be 6 times happier at work and 3 times happier in your personal life. So that's why I'm passionate about strengths. This is the list of all 34 strengths from this tool. You can take it in different languages as well. It'll still give you an English report if you like, but it gives you your top 5 strengths. It's 33 Aussie dollars, I think. And so these are all the getting stuff done strengths. These are the leadership strengths. These are the relationship building strengths, and these are the strategic thinking strengths. So my strengths are all in these 3 families. All my strategic thinking strengths are later in my like 20s and 30s out of that ranking of 34 strengths. So I employ people that are more strategic thinkers to help me with those type of things in my business. Okay, and with that, this is just a sample of the report. So this is my daughter's. So these are her top 5 strengths that she got back when she took the strengths survey earlier this year. And so some of them are intuitive, but some of them you have to study and learn a bit more about what they mean. Okay, let me see. We have some questions. Where do we locate this? Okay, yeah, we provided a link here. No worries, Judy. Thanks for asking. Okay, so now let's go on. So that's another, by the way, that's another way to set yourself apart from your competition. So people have brought their top 5 strengths survey results to their job interview and showed the employer, and they were impressed. They were excited that this gives further proof that they are a good match for the role, the job that they're interviewing for. So don't discount the gravity of this strengths report. It's quite helpful. Okay, so I decided a week ago that I need to do a blog article or even a video on job search strategy. So I feel like too many people rely on just the advertised online jobs. Not good enough anymore, and it has been for the last maybe 6 to 8 years. So there's so many jobs nowadays that are found in the hidden market, and to the tune of 70 to 80% of these jobs are found through who you know. So the direct approach and through finding people that might know an opportunity. Whereas the jobs that are advertised are only about 20 to 30%, and that percentage is going down. So when you're thinking about your job search strategy, don't do 100% of online job search. You actually have to I've got a client who's made a list of 25 coffee date. And by coffee date, I mean like Zoom, web chats, or maybe even phone calls. But she's reaching out to strategic people that can give her career advice. You're not asking for a job, you're asking for career advice. And most people, particularly now during COVID, they're really happy to help others. Just to give advice for, if they're super busy, you can ask for 15 minutes. If you already know that they're kind-natured, they will give you 30 minutes. Sometimes they'll give you 30 minutes and then give you longer time. So people have had success in doing this and reaching out through LinkedIn to find profiles of people that they'd like to meet at the company they'd like to work for, or maybe profiles of people that are in the job that they would like to aspire to be. And then a lot of times through LinkedIn, you have connections that know someone that could help you. And so I've been doing that quite a bit lately. I've been introducing people to people in their field. And because I've asked them to interview or to give career advice, the people are happily doing that with these individuals. So it doesn't necessarily lead to a job, but it plants a seed, and that person may give you other contacts or other suggestions. So eventually it's kind of doing that more strategic job search plan. It's leading you to other opportunities. And there are people, when I looked back through my 13 jobs in my career, 11 of them were through who I knew versus applying for an online advertised job. So it really is important that you think of other ways, asking people at the hairdresser, people in your mom's group, Facebook moms. I've had a lady a week ago that we posted, you know, can we get some career advice from the Facebook moms, the North Shore Facebook moms. So there's different ways of reaching out to the community, and yeah, it's being creative in how you approach people so that they're not scared that you're asking them for a job. Okay, and then this is something else that people need to be aware of. So there's a lot more social media focus. People will look up your LinkedIn profile. You will never know that they looked at you because they've got an account that they pay for that allows them to secretly view profiles. Some people get, I had a lady a few months ago that was in cybersecurity, and she got approached for a role behind the scenes in LinkedIn, and she did get the job at Deloitte. So you have to be aware that your LinkedIn profile looks polished. It's got a nice photo of you. And you also have to be aware that, and even when I was the HR director, my HR team would look at Facebook profiles to see if there was anything shady. Like, were you, you know, did you have pictures of you drinking alcohol all over your photo, or posting, you know, really suggestive or, you know, just possibly inappropriate photos that could be seen by workers in the workplace. So you just want to be conscious of that, particularly for the younger ones. You know, if there's swear words on your Facebook, that might mean that they don't give you an interview. So you want to watch those things on your Facebook and your Instagram. I promise you, there's also articles on LinkedIn and in the journalism space about how people are looking at your social media channel. So you want to make sure that you got kind of a consistent professional brand that would imply that you are a good worker. Okay, so I've got a new question. How would you approach the job search if you want to change industries? So that's really important, because it's going to be much harder for you to get the job through just online application. It's much more reliant on networking and actually showing that, you know, if there is a bit of a skills gap in transitioning to the new industry, it's showing that you're going out and getting the education, or you're volunteering to work at a workplace and be, you know, an intern or an apprentice for 30 days so that you can learn a bit more about the industry. You can ask employers for work experience to see if you like that new industry. So ask people that are in that industry to mentor you, and that will help you find opportunities and give you feedback on what you need to build in order to transition to that new industry. And for anyone that is transitioning industry, your whole first page of your resume should be all about your capabilities and the transferable skills that matter to the new role that you're seeking. So you almost play down, like, I had procurement experience, I had IT project management experience, and I had HR experience. And so if I'm not going for HR jobs, I can just kind of remove some of that detail because it doesn't matter anymore, the things that I achieved as an HR director. So I would, you know, if I'm going for IT project management, I would talk much more about the projects that I managed and the budget and, you know, the volume of people that I managed on a team. So you want to make sure that your resume is speaking to that audience. And my recommendation is you don't have more than 2 versions of a resume, because otherwise then it gets confusing. I hope that helps. Okay, moving on. These are a list of helpful job sites. There's a new one that I've come across recently, and it's called, I really like it, it's called Work180. .com.au, and these are businesses that are they've got policies in their company. They're all about diversity and fairness and even pay equity for women. So have a look at those, because I saw some big brand companies that are advertising jobs on that website, and there were quite a few when I looked at it. I also love Beam. I love that business and what they're all about. So they're posting jobs that are part-time for women, and some of them are quite senior. You know, marketing director that only works 3 days a week, 4 days a week. Council jobs are a ton of jobs when I looked at those as well. And then, like I said before, don't forget to use LinkedIn and Seek.com. Just set the search engine for your keywords. So actually put your keywords in quotation marks so that it really narrows down the jobs of the certain words that you want it to look for. And then you can set it up to give you daily alerts or just weekly alerts so that you can look at those roles. Puffling is a new one. I don't know how successful it is, but it's actually a method. So if two people want to apply for one job, it's job sharing. And it is done, it's rare, but it is happening in Sydney and in Australia that two people can do one job. And it's actually sometimes more cost effective for the business as long as there's great synergy between the two people and the communication between the two people. So puffling kind of helps those individuals approach the employer and give them that suggestion and actually give them the structure on how it might work. And then just talking about LinkedIn, so there's lots of good uses. If you are looking for like an office job or a professional job, you really should start looking at LinkedIn, looking at advice, following companies that you are interested in, because that helps you if you get an interview to know what's happening with them. Following people in the industry or in the role that you really like, asking them for advice. There's just a wealth of information on LinkedIn, and it's growing. I think I've heard like 10 users a minute are still joining LinkedIn, so it's growing rapidly around the world. These are some TED Talks that I like to give to clients. So particularly for women who've been out on maternity leave, this is a good TED Talk. TED Talks are usually about 10 to 20 minutes. Why we have too few women leaders. I really like Sheryl Sandberg. She wrote the book Lean In, which I've read about and can relate to. Kind of bossy girls were labeled negatively, but now it's starting to change. And that was me probably as a kid. Brene Brown, this is a confidence builder. I love her. So she's an American lady from Texas, and she talks about the whole world functions better when because of vulnerability. You wouldn't choose to date someone or to marry someone if you didn't choose to be vulnerable. You wouldn't choose to move to a new city. You wouldn't choose a particular school. So the power of vulnerability is what she talks about. And then Amy Cuddy is the psychologist that has a very, very famous TED Talk about the star pose and how you can improve your brain function from doing some of those power poses. So that's some helpful resources for people. And then I guess this is a recap before we open it up for more questions. So why it's important to know your strengths and to actually have a list of at least 3 of those strengths. If you don't take the Gallup Strength Survey, then take some time to look through. There's probably lots of words on the internet that you can choose from to identify your top strengths. How to write a cover letter, resume that gets you noticed. Why it's important to show passion for the role you're applying for, where to find jobs that are right for you, and how to ace an interview. So with that, I know some of you have to go, and I want to say thank you for watching. For those of you that would like to ask questions, I am happy to stay a bit longer to answer those questions if you like. Okay, so we have a new question. Very informative. You're welcome, Sonia. Thank you. So we've given the link to the Gallup Strengths. What other questions might anyone have? Okay, regarding referees, do you ignore that section altogether, Or write referees available upon request. I wonder if this sounds like you're avoiding this. I would avoid it altogether. So nowadays, reference checking is outsourced to a third party. So it's not like the people that are scanning your resume are going to call those people anyway. So it's better for you to control that messaging and that communication. So ideally, when you get to that stage where they ask for referees, it's usually after the first interview, to be honest, that you've done well in the interview. Then that's a good sign. That means they might offer you the job. And that's when I would call your 2 or 3 people and say, hey, I'm really excited about this role. I had an interview. Here is the job. And you can even talk about what you would love them to share about you but sometimes they don't get a choice. So I had to do a reference a few weeks ago, and it was like 30 questions. And I had such high praise for this person. It was all automated on my phone. They actually kicked it back and said, sorry, we don't believe you. You have to change your answer. So I had to go back and score her a little bit lower. Like, she was my favorite all-time employee of all the years that I worked. So I just could not say enough good things about her. But I did have to go back and modify responses on this automated system that they were checking references for. So I would hold them back, because what if you give a reference and somebody's out of town? Someone may be in a dark place because they lost their job. So I would keep control of that and not mention the referees section in your resume at all. Good question. Okay, so what other questions do we have? Okay, when it listed a recruiter's contact number on ads, is that better to call before sending the application or after the application? It is better to call before the application. And that is such a good question, because when you call, you're now raising the probability that they could give you an interview, because you're forcing them to look at your resume, and they don't look at all of the pile of resumes. So if you're able to have that conversation, if you're able to get them to pull up your resume that's already possibly in their inbox, that's a good thing. I call it kind of the 3-strike attack. If you can, send them an email, send them a LinkedIn request, phone call them, these are all going to raise your chances of getting the interview. The question you have to be prepared for is, tell me about yourself. So you want to tell them a bit about you personally and your career, because they may not have your resume in front of them. You want to be prepared for the question of, what salary are you looking for? It is okay to give them a salary range. If you're not sure what the salary range is, email me and I'll send you a benchmark salary data. It's like 150 pages, and it's got the salary range for every job in Sydney, in Melbourne, in Perth. I'm happy to share that with everyone. So you have to be prepared to answer those 2 questions. Like, tell me about yourself, what's the salary, and possibly a third one, which is, when are you available? So have that worked out in your mind. So great question. So yes, you should call the person. Make sure you're in a quiet place. Make sure you've got those answers to those questions kind of in your notes in front of you so that you're ready. And yeah, I think it's a great idea. You could even ask them, has the short list been, when is the short list going to be finalized? And what that's asking them is, when will they submit the candidates to the client or the employer for interview selection? So if they've already done that, it's kind of good for them to tell you on the phone, oh yeah, that ad needs to be removed, but we've already submitted the shortlist. So that's a good question as well. Okay, next question. Is it bad if I call the business that interviewed me 2 weeks later to see where they are at? Nope, not at all. In fact, if they tell you they are going to get back with it to you within 1 week, I would wait probably 2 to 5 days, after 5 business days after that, and I would give them a call and just check in, because persistence pays off. So just ask them, were you successful? Have they completed the shortlist for the second round? Yeah, so you could ask them questions like, could you get feedback from the interview? Yeah, ask them if the job is still being advertised or being recruited for. So that is okay. What type of question will you ask them when you call the recruiter? So that I already talked about. So you're asking them, when will the shortlist of candidates be submitted. So that means they've got to take 100 or 200 applications and possibly shave it down to usually like 5, maybe 10 people. They might give those 10 resumes to the technical manager, the hiring manager that's going to manage this person to select their favorite candidates. So asking that question of when is that shortlist finalized for the person that's receiving all the resume applications, that's a really good question to ask them. You could also ask them, why is the role vacant? So sometimes you find that there's a high turnover of this job and the person only lasted like 3 months, 6 months. That's a red flag for you. It's probably a very stressful job. I've had a lady take that job, but she knew it was stressful going in. She wanted to get 12 months experience because before that she only had 17 years working at IBM. So she wanted to get one other employer on her resume, and then she knew after that 12 months of stressful job she could take that experience and go work for other companies that would be more enjoyable. Good questions. Okay, we still have about 13 of you on the line, so I'm happy to take more questions if you like. So questions about...
There's one more in the chat room, Robin.
Oh, okay. I can't see the chat room. Let me see.
The question is it okay to use dot points in a letter? This seems new. Does it convey the ability to communicate in writing well?
Oh, that's a good question. So yes, it's okay to use... It is preferred to use dot points more frequently in both the resume and the middle part of the cover letter because it helps people skim the ideas. And so it's also helpful if you bold the heading of what that dot point is about. And that's kind of, I guess, training in business writing skills, because for people that are very time poor, being able to read whole sentence and paragraphs, you're going to lose the reader and you're not going to convey the really important points. So summarizing and using dot points is definitely more frequent today. Good questions, Trudy. Okay, so we have another in the Q&A. Can persistence become annoying for the employer? Look, I wouldn't, in a way, yes, but you're actually showing that you're passionate about working for them. So until that employer says, please stop calling me, I would keep trying. But I would do it in a way that's very non-intrusive. So I would send them a letter, and at the end of the letter say, I'll call you next week. Or if I left them a voice message, I wouldn't ask them to call me back. I would say, I'll call you again in a week, or I'll try you again later. So it's always on you that they don't have to call you back. So if you're making demands for them to reach out to you, then that becomes annoying. But if you're making contact and saying, hey, I'd really like to talk to you, really love to work for you, but I'll call you later, or I'll get in touch with you again later this month, those are less intrusive, and the person on the receiving end kind of would admire that about you. So that's a good question. Thank you, Chris. Okay. Any questions, guys? You can ask me anything. I'm happy to stay. I want to help people during the COVID pandemic find jobs. People are finding jobs. In fact, I had a client yesterday or the day before who said, Robin, I want to post that I got a new job, but I don't want others to feel bad. So I had done the strengths with this man, and I know that he has empathy, which is a lovely quality. And I said to him, it's really up to you, but I think it's actually good for you to show some good news to others that people are getting jobs in this current climate, and that you should post your good news. And perhaps because you're the new man on the totem pole, this job is not guaranteed for the next year. So maybe some of those contacts that congratulate you are people that you can also utilize if you do end up being let go. And then you've now got a new, set of people, positive people that might be willing to help you. So in the end I said, it's up to you, but I would post it because it gives encouraging news to others that some are getting new jobs. Okay, we'll give it 1 or 2 more minutes. Does anyone else, don't worry about your grammar or your English if you do want to write a question. We'll give you another.
We've got one question in the chat, Robin.
Okay.
So they're asking if a scanned signature in your letter is appropriate. The example you showed only had the name typed out, but is a scanned signature?
Yes, it's perfectly fine. It's not a legal document, so it actually shows a bit of tech savvy if you've got a scanned signature in your cover letter. So yeah, that's not a problem at all. It shows that you're more advanced than other people. So yeah, it doesn't matter. You can type your name or you can truly sign it and send it to the interviewer. You're welcome. And make sure everyone, if you are on LinkedIn, that you go in and you can Google it, claim your vanity URL. So I'll just write this. Don't forget to Google how to claim your vanity URL so that you can make your LinkedIn URL that you're putting at the top of your resume not have all those random digits in the URL link. You can personalize it so it just contains your name, and that looks more impressive to HR people that are scanning the resumes. They think that you're more switched on in the industry. Well, great. I'm so glad that all of you were able to join today, and I hope that you found this valuable. I probably will continue having these webinars every, 4 to 8 weeks, and hopefully you can gather some information that helps you get the job. If any of this advice helps you to get a job, I love hearing good news. So please drop me an email to say that you did find employment, and I would love to hear from you and even share your story on what you value so much within this presentation. And with that, I ask all of you to have a great day and best of luck to all of you. You're really welcome. Bye.